Would you call George Washington and his famous warning against entangling alliances, is this a realist point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, particularly because, and this may give some classical liberals pause, those who celebrate like Aaron Burr's birthday or something, which is that
Those guys.
yeah, those guys. Which is that Hamilton has a role to play in the writing of the farewell address that
Sure.
you reference. President Washington is ultimately responsible for it. He delivers it, right? But it's a fantastic, I think,
The one thing that Hamilton did right, I'll even concede that.
yeah, but it's a great encapsulation of a realist view that is compatible with our essentially classical liberal worldview as a whole, right?
Yeah.
And I think a big part of it is that, look, in this worldview, the state has a proper role to play, right? The state should be limited. It should have a very narrow set of jobs that it is meant to do, which is largely protecting the property rights of Americans and our collective, territorial integrity. And it needs to do that well. But what that means and how you pursue that is going to be different depending a lot on the context. And this is where I would be different than some others probably that are allies, in that I don't identify as a non-interventionist or as anti-war. I identify as being a realist and a restrainer, but a big part of that restraint comes from the fact that the environmental conditions and how we would define the national interests mean that we can be restrained, and in many ways we can be against interventions because of the particular context of our day. And so I would say that realism would not tell us that we should always be restrained in our approach to foreign policy, unless restraint just means prudentialism, which of course it should always be. But if restraint means something more, it means like a commitment like Washington to avoiding the type of entangling alliances. Now, again, he didn't use that term, it's Jefferson, but the kind of those alliances that aren't consistent, that are permanent, we should you may counsel that. And you may counsel the other kind of pillar of kind of Washington's great rule, if you will, of a kind of reticence to intervene, particularly back then in the old world contest. But it was grounded in this notion that that's not good for the United States, particularly in the moment they were in. And I think that there are some moments in which a different approach to grand strategy would be necessary to secure the state, even a classical liberal state. Now, there are some foreign policies or grand strategies that simply would be incompatible with classical liberalism, period. So for example, there are some means that would simply be inconsistent, and we would be loath to adopt them. Now, one thing we've understood from some of the academic literature on some of those means is that they don't work either. So that's kind of nice that all good things go together, although we should be very careful when that's the case. But in the case of like strategic bombing or quote unquote strategic bombing, or in the case of terrorism, when you're specifically targeting innocent civilian non-combatants, those don't tend to actually work. So there's a lot of academic literature on how strategic bombing fails, and also how terrorism, defined the way I just did, that also fails at meeting your ultimate ends. But those would be inconsistent, I think, with a classical liberal approach.